right, so welcome back. So now it's time to move from being like a local, like variables only website to Firebase. So like when you're a variables only, you can change things, but of course, if you refresh the page, it's just gone, right? So no data is actually stored anywhere. And so what we want to do is we want to start using Firebase. And we're going to also start getting a little bit more organized at this stage in the game as well. One thing that we're going to do to add some organization is I want you to start organizing your bookmarks. So you can see that I've got my bookmarks bar here. On a Mac, I can show it and hide it with, I think it's Command-Shift-B. But it's kind of nice to have a little bookmarks folder. There's going to be enough bookmarks in this class that it would be nice just to go ahead and make a little bookmarks folder out of it. To get into your bookmarks area, I think you can click on the little dots here and say bookmarks and then Bookmark Manager. And then you can right click in here and you can say like add folder and create a folder called ng fire, right? And let's use this as an opportunity to just kind of put some different bookmarks. So I'll go ahead and clean mine out a little bit here just so I kind of start with a pretty empty folder. So one bookmark that I put in was like the course website, right? So you can add the course website into there. It'd probably also be wise to add localhost 4200, right? So this will just be localhost. You can go and type in the 4200. But this will be a nice convenience just for like launching things. It'll also be important when we start like doing things like Firebase installation, so you can have a link to where the Firebase installation steps are at. So let's just go ahead and start with that level of organization. So now let's start talking about Firebase. So first off, Firebase Console, that's a place that you'll go pretty regularly. If you want to, you can put that into your ng fire folder. By the way, I call it ng fire because that's my abbreviation for this course. So it's an Angular with Firebase course. ng fire kind of smushed together. Makes it nice and short. So the Firebase console is a place where I'm going to go a lot. So I'll just add it to my bookmarks. And what I want to do is I've got two projects in here that I care about. I've got my default one. So I'm going to go to my default one here. Making sure that my rules are still, true. And what I'm going to use the default one for my local host testing, and then I'm going to use my one that's called like my username favorite things for my production data. So here's what we've got to do. So we've got to tie this web app into Firebase. And what you want to do is you want to click on Overview, and it'll say like add an iOS app, add an Android app, or add a web app. So a web app is obviously what we want. So you're going to click on that link. And then here's an example of what it tells you you're going to need to add your web app. So there's this step called initialize app, and you pass in an object called config. We're going to structure ours a little bit different. You can see this is kind of for old school, just like regular web apps. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to copy these lines right here, and then we're going to kind of do the rest of it a little bit different. So go ahead and copy these lines right here. So I'm just going to use a plain old Command-C for my clipboard. I'm not going to click the copy button because the copy button would get everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add those into my environments. So now I'm back over in Visual Code Studio. I've got a production environment, and then I've also got my development environment. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and add a new field. So this is just an object. I'm going to call my field Firebase Config. And it's going to be an object like this. And I'm going to paste in that information for my clipboard. And then auto format, by the way, is Option-Shift-F on my Mac. And then this is optional. I like to do trailing commas when I can get away with it. That is not important at all. I just do that so that like whenever I add another thing to it later, the get diff doesn't mark that line as a change. So you'll see me do that a lot. If you don't like trailing commas, don't worry about it. But you can legally do it in TypeScript files. You cannot do it in JSON files, but I do it sometimes. So that is my development information. So what this is doing is this is tying my web app to my Firebase database It also ties it to the auth and the storage bucket, but I don't care about those. To be honest, the only one I care about is my database tying it in. So when I'm doing development, I'll use that one. And then whenever I'm doing production work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a different one, right? So I want to close this guy down, and I want to switch over to my Fisher DS favorite things. Looks like it's right here. Great. And in favorite things, I'm going to also make sure that the rules are true. So database rules true. That's all set. And then I'm going to click on overview. You can see here I've got a couple apps because I use this in the iOS course, and we also use it in the Android course. But what I'm going to have to do for me is I'm going to have to say add another app. You already had this view, and click web. And I'm going to copy the innards again. And much like we did for the development environment, we're going to do the same thing for the production equals true environment. And that's we're going to have a Firebase Config. And it's going to be an object with those things as its innards. And then I'm going to add my trailing comma because that's how I roll. And so that's going to tie development to one database and production to another database. To be honest, this is complete overkill for this app. We're just kind of doing a simple thing, but I just kind of want to show you best practice because whenever you work at a company, you're going to always structure your information this way. So you're going to have kind of like your development world that's just like garbage data that you can delete whenever you want. And then you're going to have the production environment, which is the user's data, which has to stay very pristine. And Angular has all these things set up to where it's easy to do. You just kind of need to set it up. All right, so that's all well and good. But if I try to do any Firebase things in my app right now, it's going to say, Firebase, what the heck is Firebase? So what we've got to do is we've got to do an npm install of Firebase. So let's go learn a little bit more about how you use npm with Firebase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a search for Angular Fire 2. There is a GitHub repository called the Angular Fire 2 repository. Angular Fire 2, what is it? It is a wrapper library that wraps up the standard Firebase API and kind of makes it a little bit more Angular, I guess is what I'd say. They make commits to it pretty regularly. Interestingly, the Angular Fire 2 library is currently in version 4.0. So just the name of it is Angular Fire 2, but it's actually in version 4.0 to support Angular 4. And what you want to do from here is you want to figure out, hey, how do I install this thing? There's a little bit of information on this front page about installations, but really what you want is you want the developer guide for installation and setup. So go ahead and click on installation and setup here. In the installation and setup, you can see that there's some prerequisites about having the Angular CLI. We've already done those things. Creating a new project, that's exactly what we did. Testing your project with Serve, that's exactly what we did. And then here's where the real things start. So step 3. So here's what I want to do. I want to click on this little link thingy-mabobber over here. And you can see that changed my URL. And I want to save this into my folders. So this is my Angular Fire 2 setup link. And now this will be really handy because anytime I want to do the setup, I'll just click on this link and it'll remind me of what I need to do. So the first thing I need to do is I need to run this npm command. So I'm going to click on that guy. I'm going to paste it into terminal. If you're using Windows, it's a little bit more of a pain to paste, but I think you should be able to right click and that'll do a paste for you. But it's going to be an npm install of Angular Fire 2 and Firebase. So it's actually installing two things. It's installing Angular Fire 2, which is kind of like the wrapper for Angular, and then Firebase, which is like the standard Firebase stuff that everybody uses. Great. So it looks like I got a warning about a peer dependency, but I predict that it's going to be okay. Yeah, it looks like Angular Fire 4 needs a dependency for Firebase 4, but the Firebase was a slightly older version. actually, this brings up a great opportunity for me to say this is an ever-changing world, right? Like changes every couple of days, right? So I'm going to see if there's any problems with this, but to be honest, like sometimes you see warnings like this, and if things don't work, you need to remember that, hey, they warned me that this might not work way back here. But they're continually changing and upgrading things. So I did that update. I also typed at the end of this the word --save. Now what --save does, if you come back over to your project, is it actually writes that into your package.json file. Package.json, we haven't talked about it yet, but what it is it's a list of all the things that are in your node modules folder. And so the idea is that if somebody else like does a git clone of your repository, they would need to run npm install. And what npm install would do is it'd look through here at all your dependencies and it'd bring those things in. Ooh, yeah, using Firebase 4 now. How exciting is that? Great. So that was step number 1. Was done there. The next thing is to add Firebase to your environments variables. Hey, that's exactly what we just did, which is great. You can see they did not choose to do the trailing comma, but that's okay. They also called theirs Firebase, whereas I called mine Firebase Config. I just have to remember that they called theirs Firebase in the later steps, whereas mine is called Firebase Config. The next thing is set up ng module for the Angular Fire module. So it says open this file. I can do that. So I go open that file right here. Check, got that file. And it said inject the Firebase providers and set up your Firebase configuration. So I can see that they've got a couple of imports here. So I can copy those 2 import lines and I can just paste those right in here. Great. Then it says I'm going to have the browser module. I actually have a few other things as well. And then I'm going to copy this Angular Fire module.initialize app. And hey, that initialize app command, that's one you might recognize because whenever we pasted things in from over here, that was like what it said we were going to do, initialize app. So that kind of does make a little sense. So I'm going to copy that. That goes into my imports area. And I'm going to paste that. Say I'm going to have to add a comma there. Paste that into here, and you'll notice that it says Firebase. Hey, what the heck is Firebase? That's because we called ours Firebase Config. Kind of nice. Visual Code Studio does a lot of autocomplete things for you, so it knows that in environments you've got something called Firebase Config. So very impressed with the IDE there. And so what that does is that calls the initialize app step. Let's pause for a minute and talk about app module. What is app module? App module is where you set up your entire app. You say all the different tools that you're going to be using, and you'll modify app module quite a bit to like say, hey, this is a tool I'm going to be using. We're not done. Next up in here, it says that you can add an optional name. I strongly recommend you do not do this. It causes problems, right? So it causes problems if you want to use the standard Firebase API alongside Angular Fire 2. If you do this, it will cause you trouble. So don't ever do that step. Next thing, set up the individual modules. So Firebase has a lot of pieces. It has pieces that do authentication. It has pieces that do the database. It has pieces that do the storage module, the message module. In this app, we don't care about auth, but we do care about the database. So in the same file, I'm going to copy one more import, and that's Angular Fire database module. And I'm going to stick it in here as well. And then I come down here and I grab this line right here. This says Angular Fire database module, and I'm going to need this one as well because I'm going to use the database. So I'm going to grab that. By the way, you'll notice that this one does have a trailing comma. That's because I helped contribute to the repository there and I snuck it in. So this imports Firebase database, and it's only needed if you're using database features, which we are. Great. So we did the setup things, which is great. The next thing we need to do is we need to open our app component TS file. So that's this guy right here. And we need to have a constructor that brings in the Angular Fire database. So I'm going to go ahead and make a constructor here. So what's going on here? So this is dependency injection. So this says, hey, in this component, I need access to the Angular Fire database. And the way you do dependency injection is you just call for it in your constructor, and then Angular under the hood sees that you need it, and it gives you the Angular Fire database reference. And the way this works is that it was actually set up over here in the app module, and so here you can use dependency injection. It's got a red underline because it's just missing the import, but that's easy to fix. The auto import trick had the little light bulb here. I clicked on the light bulb, I clicked on this, and you can see it just typed it for me at the top. Interestingly, it typed it with single quotes. I need to go into my settings somewhere and change that, or typed it with double quotes, whereas my linter is going to want single quotes. So I'm going to go ahead and change it for the sake of my linter. There is a configuration I can set for that somewhere. I just forget where it's at. Cool. So this actually is important stuff. So let's make sure that our web app still loads and everything is fine. So I come over here and I just make sure, yep, everything's still green. Everything's still green there. I'm going to go ahead and check this in because this, now we have the power of Angular at our fingertips, and we'll actually do something with it next time. So the files that changed, we changed our package.json whenever we did the npm install. We changed our app component TS file. We used that dependency injection, which we're going to actually use that more later. Just this step alone, though, is important because it does the initializing of the app. The next thing we did was we added Angular Fire to our module, and we connected the prod information and the development information. So this is the setup steps for Firebase. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and cut this video off here, and we'll come back next time and we'll actually do something with it. All right, see you next time. Bye.